America.us. Information on our guest on the program, all guests on the program at our website. As mentioned, the guest on the program is Susan Kruger, a certified teacher, learning expert. Her book, Soar Study Skills, the #1 best-selling study skills book on Amazon. And Susan, welcome to This Week in America. Not bad for someone who struggled in first grade and cried over doing her homework.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the program. I love what you're talking about in the book, and the book is called SOAR Study Skills, a simple and efficient system for earning better grades in less time, used by a number of teachers, a number of schools around the country. We'll be talking extensively about that. Information available at studyskills.com. And I want to talk about how this whole came about. In your fascinating background, I mentioned as a first grader you would cry because of all the homework and struggled to get everything done, everything accomplished up through first year in college. And I understand then you sort of had this moment that maybe I'm making this more complicated, more difficult than it need to be. Tell me if it needs to be. Tell me about what happened in college and how that was the genesis for the SOAR Study Skills.
Sure. Well, yeah, I struggled all through K through 12, and as I graduated from high school and was preparing to go into college, I knew something would have to change because I was hearing horror stories of how much more work I would have to put into college, and I didn't think it would be humanly possible for me to put much more effort. I was already giving school my heart and soul, but getting very mediocre grades. And somehow I had this sense that there had to be a better way. I think I learned that from my dad, that there's always a way you can sort of learn your way out of a problem. But I found a couple books on how to prepare for college and read through them and just applied a few strategies I learned from them right away during my first semester in college, and was able to get a 3.9 grade point average and then maintain that all the way through. And not only did I get much better grades, but I also got them in far less time than I did in middle school or high school or even grade school for that matter. So I realized right away all it took was just a few strategies to make such a big difference that there was no reason why I couldn't have learned those skills earlier in life, and I wish I had learned them earlier in life. But that was the beginning of SOAR. I mean, SOAR grew in baby steps from there. I was going to college to be a teacher anyway, so there was a natural fit with what I was discovering about study skills and what I was interested in professionally. And from there, I did one-on-one tutoring and eventually grew into workshops, and now today it's a program that's used in over 900 schools.
You know,
every day.
It's amazing, and so many of us grew up with this thing where we would equate the quality of study with the time spent, and sort of the new paradigm everybody's working with, or what you're working with out there, is really that more is not necessarily better. It's what you're doing with the time that you have.
Well, that's true, and actually, I think in education that mindset is still very much alive. That more time equals better results.
Right.
The teachers believe that. That's passed down, whether directly or indirectly. That's certainly the message that the students pick up. And what students don't know is that they can apply strategy to learning. They're used to applying strategies to games, sports, even manipulating their parents and teachers to get what they want. They know
Yep.
how to use strategy, but then when it comes to learning, there is virtually no sense of strategy for learning on the student's part. And that's because we're not teaching it in school.
Well, you've got some statistics that are frightening that you'll find on the website, and Susan's website is studyskills.com. 30% of kids drop out of high school in the United States. In the United States of America, 30%, almost 1 out of every 3, or certainly 3 out of every 10, decide to drop out of school. So, we're not doing something right, obviously, not doing a lot right.
Right. And I mean, look at toddlers. Toddlers are a good example that we are born as human beings. We are born with a love of learning. And unfortunately, school tends to squash that love of learning out of people. And I think that's largely what that 3 out of 10 is. I mean, certainly there's social conditions and so forth, but we're not respecting the natural curiosity of students in school. And we're not giving them the tools to be successful either. And, of course, that's what I focus on with study skills.
The book is called SOAR Study Skills, a simple and efficient system for earning better grades in less time, a whole system, and you'll find out about it at Susan Kruger's website, which is studyskills.com. I want to talk about some of the concepts you talk about in the book, and you mentioned before that working smarter, things that you're able to teach the student to do that makes it a lot more enjoyable. It gives them a lot more pleasure. They learn a lot better. I mentioned before the program, a lot of the skills you're talking about here can easily be adapted in real life and are skills that adults can lose. And we'll talk about that as we go through some of these. But talk about strategic learning. You mentioned that a little bit before. What's the concept behind that?
Well, it's understanding that your brain has a certain way of working, and if you can understand how your brain works, then when you read a textbook, for example, most students picture reading as looking at every individual word of the black and white text in a textbook. And that's very boring, it's very slow, it's very laborious. And with strategy, you first of all begin to understand that the brain really likes pictures. And so one of the strategies I teach students is when you're reading a textbook, to read the pictures first. I remember myself as a middle school student, when I had a reading assignment, I skipped over any of the charts or the graphs or the visuals because in my mind that wasn't reading. And what I've learned is that was completely backwards, because those visuals help the brain form sort of like a lattice or framework. So then when you go back and read the black and white text, now you have a framework that helps you make sense of the information, and the brain is so much more efficient at weaving all of those details in around that framework. So strategy is just about understanding the best ways to work with your brain. And again, I mean, I'm just giving you, 1/10 of this, but that's one example, is using the visual impact from your textbooks to maximize your reading comprehension and ultimately improve your reading speed.
Well, it makes sense, and all of us can relate to what you went through because I think I find myself doing that. I'll read the text. It's sort of like any picture, graph, whatever is sort of secondary to the actual text.
I just had a conversation with someone last week where he was talking about his 6-year-old daughter who's learning how to read, and he made the comment about how she'll cheat and use the picture to figure out a word. I thought, that's wrong. That's not what we should be teaching our students, because as adults, most adults, when they pick up a newspaper or a magazine, they flip through and look at the pictures to identify what it is they want to read.
Right.
So we do that as adults, but we're stifling that out of our children, and we're telling them that using those pictures, that's cheating. And of course I very politely said, well, no, we're not. That's not cheating. She's actually trying to make meaning, and she's using every different way she can. I think that's an example of brilliance, actually, on the 6-year-old's part.
Yeah, actually, your 6-year-old is a step ahead of you.
Right.
You should be learning from her, and it's like, I think she's on to something. Susan Kruger is our guest on This Week in America. Our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Information on Susan, how to get all the information on SOAR Study Skills. Also, you can link on and get that. You can go directly to studyskills.com. Something else, and there's so many interesting aspects of this, again, that we can apply not only to our kids, so it's like less of a battle at homework time, that we can apply in daily life as well. Power strategy, that's sort of the cornerstone of what you're teaching. Tell me what that's all about.
Sure. Well, the concept of power strategy is that there are strategies you can use that require a little bit of effort but yield big results. If you've ever heard of the 80-20 principle, that really, I didn't even realize this when I came up with the term power strategy, but 80-20 says that you'll get 80% of your results from 20% of your effort. And that's what a power strategy is. So I focus a lot of time, in fact, most of SOAR is about finding those powerful leverage points in every different task you have to do. One of them, of course, I mentioned was textbook reading. Most powerful leverage point there are visuals, and using them in a strategic way. Organizing yourself. I teach students to get rid of all the 12 to 14 different folders and notebooks their teachers require them to have and condense everything down to one binder, and I have a system for that. It's a high leverage point because then everything's in one place, and it reduces the amount of stuff students have to carry and makes all those folders and notebooks look alike. So there's all kinds of compounded problems, and when you find those heavy leverage points, that's where you're able to get better grades in less time.
You talk so much about prioritizing and organizing, and you got a statistic in there that's it's amazing. For every minute spent organizing, an hour is earned. So when we're organizing, we're actually really cutting down the time we need to perform various tasks.
Yeah, and the challenge there, of course, is being proactive. It can be difficult, especially if you have the mindset that you're not an organized person. There's a perception that you are either born organized or not.
Right.
I can tell you I was born not organized, and I had a teacher in 3rd grade that actually taught me some some strategies that turned me into an organized person. But yeah, there's a little bit of proactive mindset involved there, but it's so small. It's smaller than most people realize, and the benefits to be gained from it are just enormous.
Again, talking about using visuals, you've got a great one in the book when you're talking about prioritization, and everybody really needs that, kids in particular, as they're going through a number of different topics. And you've got a jar that you use. Tell me how a jar can actually give us an example of how we can go about better prioritizing.
Sure, and I got to give credit where credit is due. This idea came from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So others listening to this may have heard it, but it's a concept that a jar represents 24 hours. And so you fill, when I demonstrate this with students, I'll fill the jar up with rocks, and I'll ask them, is the jar full? Because you get to a point where you just can't get any more rocks in there, and of course they'll say, yes, yes, it's full. And then I'll pull out pebbles, and we'll pour pebbles in there, and, is the jar full? And then some kids start catching on, but eventually then we add water, and then finally the jar is full. The point of this is to illustrate that when you take care of your big priorities first, you automatically have room and space for the smaller stuff. And, if we had tried to do it in reverse order, starting with the pebbles first, we wouldn't have room for the rocks. Or water first, there'd be no room for the rocks and pebbles. So there's a great conversation that comes about when we do this with students, but it serves the purpose of helping them understand that you have to take care of things, and you will always have responsibilities. Their career at a young age is to be a student, but eventually they'll have a career or a home to maintain or whatever. So there are always rock priorities in life. But if you play your cards right and you take care of those, you can have a great balance of fun stuff, and that's essentially what the pebbles and water represent.
You're listening to This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Information there on Susan Kruger, our guest on the program, talking about SOAR study skills. Her website is studyskills.com. A lot of great information on the website, information on how to get the books and to follow through on things like that, some great statistics, a lot of great information there as well. Time is going by way too quickly. I want to talk about, again, some of the things that mentioned in the book, and this is so important in dealing with children now. You've got an area where you talk about power down. Explain, and I think it's somewhat obvious, the importance of, just shut the rest of the stuff out, focus, get it done, and get on with your life.
Yeah, and it does seem obvious to us, but I'm glad you bring this up because I've been teaching study skills now for about 15, 20 years, and this is something that has changed dramatically in particularly the last 5 years, but I'd say last 5 to 10. Students' reaction to this concept. It seems obvious to us, but our children are being raised in a generation where they are always within arm's reach of at least one, usually 2 different forms of electronic equipment.
Right.
They're inundated with things, and they don't understand that they actually have power over them. And what I've been most impressed with, actually, is how many students, I would say 80 to 90% of students will tell us at the conclusion of our class that this is one of their top 3 takeaways. And we specifically say, if you do not learn how to control electronics now, they will always control you. And that's a very powerful soundbite with them.
Right.
Some of them, of course, are going to be more resistant than others, but for those who really understand the fact that they're going to be much more efficient if they just shut everything off for an hour, then they reap benefits from it. And I'm always very careful when I share this message with students that my goal is not to remove fun from their life by telling them to power down, but to take control of it, to take control of the electronics so they can make space for fun in their life. That I do believe that's important for them, but they have to be a little proactive about making it happen in a right way.
We've got about a minute left in the program. I want to go back to how things are still taught in schools, the emphasis some still have on time rather than the quality of time. I would think you would be getting, once teachers understand, a lot of positive response. So many teachers now are, their pay raises in the future will be based on their productivity in the classroom, getting the test scores elevated, that type of thing. When teachers find out that this is going to make learning, I hate to say easier, but maybe easier, more fun for the students, they're going to be more productive, I would think they'd be really excited about the program. Do you find that when you're introducing that to teachers?
Yeah, we get great response from teachers. The teachers who are willing to understand what we do and what our message is and respect the students in respecting their desire for balancing schoolwork with fun, we make a lot of headway, and we have some wonderful we have a wonderful response from teachers.
Susan Kruger has been our guest on This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. As always, you can log on to our website and link on to Susan's website and get information. Information on SOAR study skills. The book is available at Amazon, the #1 best-selling study skills book on Amazon. The website is studyskills.com. Susan, we'll have you back. I loved having you on the program. It is fascinating, and again, a lot of things that we can apply to real life as well. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Oh, thank you very much. My pleasure.
You're listening to This Week in America.